Ah, Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex. A futuristic haven for couples, children, and truly the entire family. There's a little something for everyone here, with the many iconic rides and attractions you can find. Everybody knows Monty's Gator Golf and Roxy's Raceway, the classics of course. The Fazcade is truly one of, if not the largest arcades to ever be created. Oh, and who could forget the roller coaster that swooped through the Pizzaplex? You all know that one. It'd be impossible to miss as the whoosh of the overhead roller coaster went up against the roar of the cars and Roxy Raceway. I mean, it's even considered a high-tech roller coaster with its bright yellow track. Truly, Fast Freddy, the speedy roller coaster of the Mega Pizzaplex, is the most famous of them all. What do you mean there's no roller coaster in the Pizzaplex? Of course there's a roller coaster. I mean, you could read just about any Tales from the Pizzaplex book and you'd know about the roller coaster. Every single description I stated moments ago was taken from different stories in the Tales books. And they would put such a heavy emphasis on this without it being something we recognize. Right? Okay, but seriously, I've been going crazy about this stupid roller coaster probably since book 2. Because when I tell you these books love the damn roller coaster, I mean every single book, except for Submechanophobia from what I can skim through, mentions it at least once. So let's get to the point. Why am I going crazy over a simple detail mentioned in the books to describe the Pizzaplex? Because it's all a part of my greater conspiracy about the relation of the books and the games. Listen, it's no secret that the FNaF community has a very divided opinion on the books. Whether it's the Silver Eyes trilogy and their baffling robot children, Charlie, Elizabeth, baby connection, Fazbear Frights and their Springtrap Impreg and Fazgoo stories. Side note, I'm so extremely tired of hearing about Fazgoo, okay? We get it, Matthew Patthew. It's a ridiculous concept and you use it to emphasize how much disdain you hold for the books. No one liked Fazgoo. It's a stupid name, it's a stupid concept, and it is not canon, and no one can convince me that it is. I am so sick of it. I really like the books and I believe they're the best thing for the series right now because of the way that they're weaving in with the overall storyline. So I beg of you, just give up the Fazgoo talk. It paints the books in such a disgraceful light and I am just so tired of hearing about it. Where was I? Oh, right. Or the Tales from the Pizzaplex books with their weird psychological torment of their characters, potential lore retcons involving extremely important canon in-game characters, and of course... And that's pretty much my basis on what roller coaster theory is. The reason I think this roller coaster is genuinely important to the series and not just some clickbait garbage I put to be a bit quirky or whatever. FNaF in his last security breach theory video, heavy quotes on that, mentions that he thinks the books are similar to the games, but a little bit different. He doesn't go too in-depth into this, but I want to focus roller coaster theory on this concept because I think it's genuinely important for us to really establish what the books are. And not even talking about Silver Eyes or Fazbear Frights because Silver Eyes is a very, 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 very obvious parallel universe. We all know that the Charlie in the games and the Henry in the games are very different from the Charlie in the book and the Henry in the book. We read about a lot of things that don't line up with the Pizzaplex as we know it in the games. But we also aren't sure how long the place has been open when the events of Security Breach play out. So it's hard to say for certain what should be there, despite it evidently being absent. Obviously the big plot relevant thing that comes to mind is the storyteller tree. But we actually read about that getting torn down in the most recent book, Tiger Rock. So does that mean it's possible the in-game Pizzaplex is just after the storyteller is removed? Sure. I mean, it could have existed in the games, but there's just no evidence to support whether it was or wasn't. Now, your more astute book readers may be asking, well, what about the climbing tubes? As they are a genuinely plot-relevant attraction, and they're mentioned several times as well in the books. And to that I say, did you actually read Haps? There's no way on earth they kept those things up for very long with their signature helper cleaner bot not only out of commission, not only MIA, but literally turned into a murderous, unstoppable robot train. Not to mention the fact that the two boys in the story broke a part of the tube maze. To be fair, it was in an isolated part of the maze that even the boys who had been through the climbing tubes many times admitted to not really going to. But it's still a hazard nonetheless, and while Fazbear Entertainment doesn't really care about safety, presumably, they're really good about covering things up. If they can conceal it, oh boy, they will. But admittedly, the climbing maze is another outlier, not just the roller coaster, as we aren't really given any other scenario that would have the maze be taken down or even be told that it is being taken down. And we don't have a timeline on any of these events, so taps could be taken months before the storyteller tree gets put in. It could be done, days after it gets put in. We really aren't sure. Now, others might point to the VR booth as a big one we don't really see in the games, but honestly, if you've read anything about the VR booth, and sometimes the AR booth, I don't know if they made them similar but different, or if they are two separate things, I'm not really sure. But regardless, nothing good ever happens in the VR booth. It kills 3 people. I mean, one of them kind of escapes, but then his arms get ripped off, which was the biggest disappointment to me since the Sea Bonnie story. I'll never forgive them how they treated that main character. Actually, you know what? Nexie's main character deserved better too. Mostly her Farfar, but Astrid herself deserved better too. I was really sad at the end of that story, genuinely. Regardless, you can see the point I'm making. There's a lot of attractions the in-game Pizzaplex doesn't have, but there's at least one story in which each of those attractions has something go horribly wrong. Fazbear Entertainment is an awful company, but they're not stupid, and they're not afraid to spend some money to cover up a liability. The roller coaster, though? The roller coaster has not been an important plot point for any of these stories. Not a single one. And I'm not counting Claustrophobia, where the prelude has some children and the main child really wants to go on the ride. That does not count. It is not plot relevant. But they always mention the roller coaster. Every single book. I'm currently sitting next to my pile of Tales from the Pizzaplex books because I read every single one of these things from cover to back. And let me tell you, there is a sticky note in every one of these books where I could find the roller coaster being mentioned. Again, except for Submechanophobia, the book number 4. But 2 of the stories in the book don't even take place in the Pizzaplex. And the other one that does, I just couldn't find it. It might honestly be in there, but I just didn't see it, and I didn't want to take the time to reread the entire story. So what is the deal with it, honestly? I sound like Jerry Seinfeld up here. My personal whack theory, I think the roller coaster is the perfect attraction for Steel Wool and the book authors to illustrate the fact that we are definitively not in the exact same timeline between the books and the games. Like I said, this is a theory, but I think it's notable enough to hold some weight to it. Because the amount of times these books mention this roller coaster without having a single story bring it into the plot is astonishingly high. It's driven me mad. It just seems like such an odd detail to keep mentioning. I know it would obviously be the biggest ride at the Pizzaplex because it claims that it goes through the atrium, so obviously it would be seen in every single story where they go into the atrium, but it's not like they mention, oh, there's Monty Golf over there, one of the biggest attractions in the whole atrium. Oh, look, There's Roxy's Raceway. It's one of the biggest attractions in the Pizzaplex. No, they always mention the roller coaster. Like I mentioned, one thing I've noticed the book's doing is tying its stories into each other. Some stories have their events taking place at the same time, most notably since the storyteller tree was implemented into the atrium, because it's shown that the Mimic 1 virus is doing something bad across the whole of the Pizzaplex. Its removal in Tiger Rock displays that those stories are connected directly to the virus form of the Mimic, and it's hard to say for certain if we'll be seeing more stories that take place while it was still up, or if they'll go back to the usual Pizzaplex liability problems like usual. That being said, I think it is trying to tie itself together via these little moments that happen at the book Pizzaplex at the same time, as a way to show that these are one continuous timeline of events. Again, back to Tiger Rock, we see the grandfather and granddaughter from the Nexi story referenced and seen by the main character. And we know that it's them because of the way that the main character looks at the doll the girl is holding. The roller coaster is just one way that we, as the readers, are able to put together the truth that is, the books are essentially a parallel universe to the games. Both universes have the original Scott Cawthon games created as a cover-up for real events that happened. Both have the main events of GGY and Patient 46's tapes, and both have the Pizzeria Sim location under the Pizzaplex. However, I believe the attractions created within the books are not to show how different the Pizzaplex has become as it's had to cover up so many new deaths, but rather to say, hey, you are not reading the exact events of what's going on in-game prior to Security Breach. Instead, think of this as world building, and something to help connect the gaps that seem confusing from Security Breach. We know now that the Mimic was not at least a complete retcon, because we know that these books were in development since Security Breach was in development. I think since Ruin has come out, it's really important to establish what the relation of the books and the games are. And I think the roller coaster is genuinely trying to tell us that the Pizzaplex as we know it in the games is not the same exact one that exists within the book universe. How is this relevant now that Ruin has come out? Well, I think it's really important because while yes, we know for sure that the Mimic exists in both universes now, people still aren't sure whether Burntrap was or was not the Mimic. Here's the thing. In the most recent epilogue in Tiger Rock, we're shown that the Mimic can essentially merge with a dead body. Quote from the books. The Mimic backed away from the blue dog costume again. It turned and started sking toward the stage curtain. A near silent sigh of relief escaped from between Lucia's lips. It was going to be okay. But then, it wasn't. Suddenly, the Mimic turned again. It scurried back toward the blue dog. What happened next happened so fast that Lucia's brain was barely able to process it. And she didn't want to process it. In a nanosecond, one of the Mimic's spidery legs reached out and peeled open the back of the blue dog costume. The instant the costume was breached, the Mimic wormed its way past the edges of the matted blue fur. Inconceivably, shockingly, the Mimic shoved itself inside the costume with Kelly. Lucia heard a sickening crunch. Kelly, Lucia thought. She hadn't even finished thinking Kelly's name before Kelly screamed. The scream speared through Lucia like a lance. It plunged so deeply into Lucia's heart that the pain felt like real physical pain, red, hot, piercing. But the scream wasn't the worst of it. The crunch was followed by a snap, then another. Kelly's screams went an octave higher. The snapping was joined by splintering sounds, spongy, wet, splintering sounds. Costume's blue fur started going dark. The darkness began at the costume's center mass, and it spread outward quickly, too quickly. Lucia heard another crunch. Kelly stopped screaming. Lucia wanted to close her eyes and pretend to be someplace else, but that didn't feel right. She couldn't do anything for Kelly now except be a silent witness to Kelly's death. So, Lucia didn't close her eyes. She watched as lumps and bulges writhed under the blood-saturated blue fur. She watched until the blue dog costume began to collapse, folding in on itself, crumpling toward the stage. She continued to watch when the lumpy pile of bloody fur convulsed and then went still. And she watched when the blood-soaked blue dog costume once again took form, unfolding itself from the stage to stand upright. She continued to watch as the blue dog walked off to the right, out of Lucia's line of sight. When the mimic was no longer in view, Lucia couldn't bring herself to look away from the blood pool spreading even wider on the wooden floorboards. They would not include this if they did not intend to tell us something. The thing is, people are arguing about the mimic animatronic that we see in Ruin being completely different from the one that we see as Burn Trap in Security Breach. People keep saying there's no way they can be the same. But if you look at the mimic's model, it's a variety of different animatronics put together. And I think it's no coincidence that the mimic's arm falls off at the elevator scene in the neutral ending of Ruin. The hands are completely different on the mimic, the legs are completely different on the mimic, and even down to the feet. They're totally different on this mimic. This is not something that someone created. This is something that created itself. We have enough similarities between the mimic and Burn Trap to say that they're probably the same, but again, nothing is definitive enough to say for certain. I personally believe that they probably are the same, but I really just don't have enough evidence to support that for certain, or even a good theory to back up that evidence. Another thing I see people keep saying is that Princess Quest is definitively the canon ending of Security Breach, and I think there's some merit to that. Obviously, we have a lot of similarities between how Freddy died and where he ended up, as well as the Princess Quest sword being shown, proving that the game was beaten and Vanessa must have been freed. But at the same time, we know that the blob is real, or Tangle as it is now being renamed to. This thing is in Ruin, and we know it is. Gregory didn't make up the blob, and he probably didn't make up Burn Trap either. We really aren't sure what happened at the end of Security Breach. The Princess Quest ending is in a comic, and the Burn Trap ending is fully animated. However, there's no comic that points towards Princess Quest in Ruin, and there is one that points towards Burn Trap in Ruin. It makes the whole thing really confusing, but I think that Steel Wool's essentially trying to say both of these things happened, just not exactly as they're shown in Security Breach. There's a reason Princess Quest is the only 3-star ending, and I think it is because that is most likely the most canon ending, but I believe, like a lot of people are pointing out, that this could be a case of Sister Location's Private Room, where just because Burn Trap's scene is fully animated doesn't mean that that actually happened. Regardless, I'm getting into a lot further territory than just the roller coaster theory, because we're no longer talking about what the books are, so I'll leave it at that for now. But I have more thoughts on that, so I might make another video about what the ending is and what the mimic is and if it's Burn Trap, so on and so forth. The main point I wanted to make today was that the books and the games are very similar, but also fairly different from each other. And I think the authors of the books, as well as Steel Wool, are trying to point us towards this fact. The roller coaster doesn't exist in the in-game Pizzaplex, but there's nothing that tells us it should have been taken down in the books either. And so help me, if we get another book that mentions it, and it becomes the main plot point, and it becomes an evil roller coaster, then I am going to lose. Anyways, this was my first FNaF theory video, so I hope you enjoyed it. I genuinely do want to make more of these because I have a lot of thoughts on the FNaF lore. I just have a hard time putting them together. To be honest, a lot of the script that I wrote for this video was very impulsive, so I kind of just put it together in like a couple of hours. I didn't even really have an outro planned, which is why I'm just kind of rambling at this point, but I do want to make more of these in the future, so if you liked it, then, you know, stick around. I want to get back to making videos, and I'm really excited about Ruin, and I hope that Help Wanted 2 expands more on a lot of the events that we've just seen, and hopefully brings back Glitch Trap, because I really don't think that he's fully dealt with, because I do believe that the Mimic virus is Glitch Trap, but that's all to be seen. So for now, I wish you a very good rest of your day, night, morning, evening, afternoon, etc., and I'll see you soon.